Levels of prejudice in Singapore remain largely unchanged from 5 years ago. A survey by the Institute of Policy Studies on 4,000 Singaporeans and permanent residents adds that minorities are more likely to experience discrimination. The survey covered prejudice in 7 areas, including race, religion, age, gender, and sexual orientation. Dr. Mathew Mathews, head of the IPS Social Lab, is here to tell us more. Dr. Mathews, welcome to Singapore Tonight. So prejudice levels remain largely unchanged from 5 years ago. Is this necessarily a good thing, or is this something that we should be concerned about?
Well, on one hand, it's actually good that as a society, most of us are not feeling that prejudice is actually increasing here. Because that's counterintuitive. If you see in many parts of the world, there's growing animosity against different groups, and so which essentially means that there's more prejudice. But in Singapore, less than a sixth actually perceive more prejudice, and that's in quite a few areas where you actually have it single-digit numbers actually. So as a society, we should not be resting on that status quo. We should be hoping that the levels of prejudice will keep coming down, that more and more people report that we don't have prejudice.
So among the 7 areas that the study focused on, race, religion, age, gender, nationality, language, and sexual orientation, where is prejudice the most pronounced and why?
We did look at a good number of areas, as you mentioned, and age prejudice was, in fact, what seemed to be what Singaporeans felt had increased over the years. It's about 18% of Singaporeans who feel that way. And it's interesting that that group feels that this is the case. The group that feels that this is the case most, those who are in their 51 to 64 age group, which probably is the age where people are trying to find jobs, perhaps having gone through a retrenchment and then being told that you're not young enough for the job. And so, people's natural inclination would be to conclude that there is some kind of prejudice against older persons, for instance.
Have these patterns shifted over time? For example, was one area more prominent 5 years ago than it is now?
I think some of the areas continue to be important. Nationality prejudice has always been cited as being something which quite a few people are concerned about, and that has continued to be. It's now second. It used to be a little bit more on the top of the list. But we continue to have the main areas that people are concerned about continue to be the same.
Okay, moving on to race relations. While the study did not see much rise in the level of racial or religious prejudice, it reported that more ethnic minorities felt that racial prejudice had risen. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, I think minorities are more likely to notice instances of discrimination. And of course, they also experience it. From the survey, about a third of minorities said they had experienced racist comments or some other experience which would signal to them that discrimination had come to play. And of course, if you have experienced discrimination, you would then perceive that society has become more and more prejudiced. For that matter, too, we noticed that younger people indicate that prejudice has risen, and this perhaps is a product of greater awareness and sensitivity to what constitutes prejudice.
So more awareness among the younger generation. The survey also showed that the majority of Singaporeans are uncomfortable about using concepts from overseas to discuss issues of race. Tell us more about that and what it really means for race relations moving forward.
Well, in this way of the survey, we did ask about some ideas which have had increasing traction overseas. Notions like majority or white privilege or locating racism in broader societal structures. In general, Singaporeans have not warmed up to many of these ideas. I'm not meaning to downplay the importance of how some of these concepts can provide some additional perspective. But for many Singaporeans, the methods of dealing with racism, which result in one group being vilified or try to attempt to find fault in one group, that just doesn't cut it. As a society, I think we prioritize notions of harmony and cohesion, and we try to find ways to accomplish that rather than focus too much on rights or justice.
And it is also arguing that Singapore's model of racialism has helped to keep racial prejudice at bay. How has this model worked in practice, and are there areas where it might need to evolve?
Well, the Singapore model of multiculturalism certainly accords respect to all racial groups, and all groups are allowed to practice their cultural beliefs. No group is looked down on institutionally. And this has presented a very strong foundation for Singaporeans to recognize and treat everyone as an equal, whether you're from the majority or the minority race. And therefore, we don't see the kind of level of, or high levels of prejudice as you see in some other parts of the world. But of course, our model of multiculturalism continues to evolve. We become, as a society, we become more and more sensitive to different needs of different groups of individuals, and different communities might feel some areas which might cause them grief, or which might slight them. These are ideas and concepts that we need to become more and more aware about. And I think as we have more discussion, more openness to talk about some of these differences in a sensitive way, I think we do better with that.
All right, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight, Dr. Mathews. Dr. Mathew Mathews, they're head of the IPS Social Lab at the NUS Institute of Policy Studies.